Welcome to the Aced It podcast, where we turn science into sense. As we begin our 11th season, I wanted to let you know that J-Coin has a new O. That's right. The formerly Justice Community Opioid Innovation Network is now the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network. Same wonderful network, same awesome podcast, but with a broader emphasis. So I am so excited that you're with us. I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and this is Aced It. This season of the Aced It podcast, we're talking all about substance use disorder, or SUD for short. We're also talking about overdose and loved ones. By loved ones, we mean everyone intimately involved with someone with SUD or an overdose incident, including the family unit, parents, children, siblings, intimate partners, and friends. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that this season will cover some challenging topics, including bereavement, grief, and suicide. If these are sensitive topics for you, you might want to consider skipping this season or listening with a support person. If after listening to any episodes you need support, please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Line. All right, this season we'll cover the experiences of parenting with an SUD overdose incident and of being a parent to a child with an SUD overdose incident. Next, we'll talk about children's experiences of having an SUD overdose incident and of being the child of a parent with an SUD overdose incident. In one episode, we'll talk about the experiences of being a sibling with an SUD overdose incident and of being a sibling to someone with an SUD overdose incident. We'll also cover intimate partners' experiences, both as being the partner with an SUD overdose incident and as being a partner of someone with an SUD overdose incident. And we'll talk about being the friend of someone with an SUD overdose incident and being the friend with an SUD overdose incident. Later on this season, we'll talk about involving loved ones in addiction and overdose treatment and the types of support available for loved ones. In 2 episodes this season, we'll do a deeper dive into loved ones' experiences with 2 populations who are greatly impacted by addiction and overdose: unhoused folks and people living in rural areas. First, in this episode, I'm going to give you a broad overview of some of the research that investigates addiction, overdose, and loved ones. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, in the U.S. alone, 6.1 million people are estimated to be living with an opioid addiction, and in 2023, more than 81,000 people died from opioid overdose. However, when we look at the numbers, we are actually seeing some positive findings too. For the first time since 2018, opioid overdose incidents are declining instead of rising. Between 2022 and 2023, there was a nearly 4% drop in opioid-related overdose deaths. While this number may seem small, it represents 3,098 people who didn't have their lives cut short. This is great news. Part of this may be because of a growing prevalence of overdose-reducing drugs. Okay, so we talked about the positives for a second, but now let's circle back to what overdose means for loved ones. According to a brand new study conducted by Kennedy Hendricks and colleagues, 32% of the adult population in the U.S., or 82.7 million individuals, have lost someone they know to a drug overdose. Importantly, that estimate doesn't include children, so it's likely that this number is actually much higher. It's really important to bring loved ones into the conversation about addiction and overdose because, as these statistics and other research indicates, addiction and overdose not only harms individuals misusing drugs, but also that person's family, friends, and intimate partners. Let's talk first about how opioid use and overdose incidents impact people's social connection and relationships. Through interviews with 41 people with opioid use disorder, Crowley and Miller found that people with OUD often try and refrain from discussing their addiction with family members because of perceived stigma. Let's take a look at a quote from one of the study participants. Kylie recalled, quote, "My addiction is kind of like everybody knows that I'm addicted, but nobody talks about it when we get together. When we get together, we're all happy, we spend time together, and we love each other. We all go about our ways. Nobody asks me about my addictions. That kind of sucks, because every now and then, I guess it would be kind of nice if I had the support of my family, like, hey, how you doing? How's that battle coming for you?" Unquote. Kylie's experience highlights how addiction can create tension and disconnect between loved ones. We also know from research that people with substance use issues may have lower social, romantic, and general life satisfaction than those who do not misuse substances. Take a study by Christie and colleagues published in 21, for instance. In this study, the research team analyzed survey responses from 339 individuals, 289 of whom had previous addiction issues with a range of substances. They found that people who misuse opioids had a larger drop in social, romantic, and general life satisfaction during the course of substance use than those who had used other drugs. Another study found similar results. In a 2020 clinical trial with 80 participants, Inagaki and colleagues investigated if opioids affect brain pathways associated with social connection. They administered naltrexone, which is a drug that blocks opioid processing, to half the participants. Then, while people were in an MRI machine, they showed people images of loved ones and images of strangers. They found that participants who were given naltrexone had reduced feelings of social connection towards loved ones. Both of these studies underscore the impact of addiction on people's well-being and relationships with loved ones. And opioid addiction and lack of connection can create a vicious cycle, as research also documents that people are more likely to misuse opioids if they lack social connection, as documented by Kantz and colleagues in a 2021 systematic review of the literature. Now, looking at the impact of a person's addiction on their loved ones in a 2021 systematic review, Teitelstad and colleagues examined how family members experienced overdose bereavement. Through a review of qualitative and quantitative studies, they found that family members face an emotional roller coaster of grief and stigmatization and a lack of support from agencies. Often, this leaves loved ones in an immense amount of pain and without any services. Interestingly, another study conducted by Parks and colleagues in 2023 examined the experiences of people with addiction and their family members and found that for the most part, family members knew overdose was possible, but believed it was unlikely that their loved ones would themselves overdose. However, a different study reached a different conclusion. In 2022, Schlossler and Hoffer interviewed 30 people who injected opioids. They found that many people who misuse opioids see overdose as, quote, an inevitable end of opioid use, unquote. In this study, nearly 75% of participants had someone in their social network die from an opioid overdose. Now, there's a ton more studies out there on the experiences of loved ones, but we're going to leave those for later episodes. One thing we should talk about now, though, is how loved ones' addiction can create a multi-generational cycle of substance misuse. Specifically, having loved ones who suffer from addiction increases a person's risk of misusing substances and, in some cases, overdosing. Take the studies by Kahn and colleagues in 2019, Arakal and colleagues in 2024, Ali and colleagues in 2019, and Nguyen and colleagues in 2020, for instance. All of these studies found that when family members were prescribed opioids, other family members had higher odds of addiction and overdose. For instance, Kahn and colleagues found that people had nearly 3 times higher odds of overdosing when they had family members who were prescribed opioids. Another study by Ali and colleagues highlighted that certain people, specifically spouses, may be at a higher risk than other family members. One study we talked about earlier, the one conducted by Crowley and Miller, provides a bit more insight into why this might occur. One of the study participants, Dennis, shared that, quote, family members, we encouraged each other. trade whose doctor was better or who spent the most, who was the easiest to get medicine from, unquote. From Dennis's story, we see how addiction may begin or evolve within the family unit. Okay, so I've had a chance to review some of the research that's out there on the impact of SUD and overdose on loved ones. There's still so much to unpack, and I'll go into all of that detail over the next 9 episodes. But I hope that this episode taught you something new today. On the next episode, we'll be covering parents' experiences, including parenting with an SUD overdose incident and being a parent to a child with an SUD overdose incident. As a reminder, if after listening to this episode you need support, please contact the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Thank you for listening to the Aced It podcast. We love hearing from you. So if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some science you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes, at Sam Houston State University in Texas. My email is drudes, D-R-U-D-E-S, at shsu.edu. And of course, thank you to the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, JCOIN's Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriter and also my fantastic doctoral student, Bryce Kushmerek McCune. And a huge and heartfelt thank you to the team at Slonky LLC for their wonderful podcast production, as always. Tune in again for another episode of Aced It.